Ladies and gentlemen, our first panel this morning will discuss AI, 5G, and big data, China's new weapons of war. But first, we have breaking news. Please welcome Gordon Chang, Lydia Chang, Matt Schlapp, and Dan Schneider.
Hours ago, the Hong Kong government arrested Jimmy Lai and two other veteran democracy advocates. In August, the American Conservative Union, Matt Schlapp, Dan Schneider, Veronica Birkenstock, Zach Campbell, and my wife went to Hong Kong to stand with the protesters. End of last year, President Trump signed two Hong Kong bills. He stands with the protesters. ACU stands with the protesters. We must stand with the protesters because the same regime that is attacking Hong Kong is attacking the freedoms of the United States of America. We must stand together.
Jimmy Lai is a great patriot for freedom. It was after our CPAC Japan, ACU flew into Hong Kong. We had a pop-up CPAC in Hong Kong. We had several great meetings. We then, the last event was at Jimmy's house. And within 3 hours after departing his house, the Chinese Communist Party had it firebombed. So he's a great patriot. We need to stand with him and all the Hong Kong people.
One thing before we depart, I think it would be important for us to send a message to Jimmy and to the freedom fighters in Hong Kong that ACU and CPAC stands with them. Can you let them hear from you? Let your voice be heard.
And the people of Hong Kong thanks the American Conservative Union, and the people of Hong Kong thanks the American people. Thank you.
And now for our panel, AI, 5G, and big data, China's new weapons of war. Please welcome Dr. James Carafano, Congresswoman Kathy McMorris Rogers, and former Attorney General Matthew Whitaker.
The United States and China are involved in a cold tech war, and the winner dominates the 21st century. A decade ago, Beijing was not considered a tech contender, but now it is a leader. The United States is behind in critical areas. Today, we will talk about big data, AI, 5G, and China's challenge to the world. Congressman Rogers, many people say that there needs to be a whole of society mobilization on tech. The question is it that serious? Do we need to do this?
Well, we absolutely need to win the future, and winning the future means winning this race with China right now. I would submit that we need to approach it the same way Ronald Reagan did when we beat the USSR, and that is it was with free markets and with a strong national defense. Because it is all related. In order for us to be a diplomatic power, you have to be a military power. To be a military power, you have to be an economic power. So winning this race is critical to our future and to American leadership and to freedom-loving people all over the world.
So when people talk about a whole of society mobilization, the question is, government's going to be involved, of course. But what is the proper role of government versus the private sector? Because we're talking about socialism. We don't want a socialist response to this. But where do we divide the line between private sector, government?
Well, right now we have the left obviously promoting an entire takeover of our economy. When you look at the proposals coming out of the left, the Green New Deal, Medicare for all, and that is the approach that the left always turns to. What we need is the approach that Donald Trump is taking right now. It's what he's laid out with AI. It's an American approach, laying out the principles that are around freedom and individual rights and individual liberty, laying out these principles, but encouraging the innovation and the technology in the private sector. It is free markets in the private sector and freedom-loving people that using their creativity that is going to be the way that we win the future.
So, Matt Whitaker, when we talk about winning this future, what do you see as the things that should be done from the government level?
Well, I think some of the things that have already been done are important. I think this last trade dispute with China really involved, to some extent, intellectual property. And the fact that the Chinese required, if you wanted to sell your products in China, you had to provide the source code or the plans for that technology. And that is very dangerous. It was being exploited by the Chinese to essentially steal our intellectual property and use it for their ends. And let's be clear as to what the Chinese are using technology for. It's to oppress their people. It is to use facial recognition software against the Uyghurs. It is to use data analytics against their people to, again, to consolidate their power in a centrally controlled government. What do we use technology for? Our economy, to expand opportunity and prosperity. And it's a stark contrast. And that's why, Gordon, you and I have talked about it before. I'm pessimistic on the China and their government being willing to work across the world with the rules that we have typically used in a free society. And so I see two different systems developing long-term in technology, where there's a Chinese system and their satellite states, and then there's a free world system that plays by the rules and protects intellectual property.
So this whole notion after the end of the Cold War that we were going to have a world that everyone worked together, that's probably not going to occur in your view.
I don't see that happening. And again, I hope I'm wrong. It would be an amazing development if China actually started being a first world power. But they are an authoritarian state. They use the tools of technology against their people to consolidate their own governmental power. And I'm just, again, you can have hope, but based on the way I see this developing, I see the United States always continuing to be the beacon of freedom and the standard setter, and the Chinese really just continuing their behaviors of stealing our technology to their own end.
Yeah, I think I find the hope in that it's American ingenuity and technology that the Chinese have been stealing, and so we got to make sure that we continue to allow for the startups and the small businesses and the next innovators in America. But China is using that technology right now, their technology, to suppress minorities, suppress those that are in opposition, but they're also selling that technology, sharing their technology with other totalitarian regimes around the world. And so it's a very real race that we are in.
And the only other point I'd put on this, Gordon, is that remember that everywhere that the Chinese have developed technology, their government sits on that technology. Whether it's WeChat, whether it's these other technologies we've seen develop, the government is in those programs and surveilling essentially the transactions and the interactions of the people, looking for any kind of messaging or activity that is contrary to their government.
So, Jim Carafano, you have talked about China stealing the world's data, and as the Congresswoman just talked about, hoovering everything up. This is really the risk for us, isn't it? When we talk about AI, when we talk about big data, it is China stealing our intellectual property and the intellectual property of others.
Yeah, that is the fundamental issue. Give me a moment, because this is crazy. This is like being at a Howdy Modi rally. This is awesome. Hey, could you guys hang on just a second? I want my mom to see this. Hang on. Okay, good. Just give me 2 seconds. I just got to say.
How come I wasn't in the photo?
No. So for 20 years, America was literally the bound Prometheus, and we argued between literally the panda huggers and the panda haters, right? And so the panda huggers was like, don't worry, they'll build Starbucks, they'll go to Disneyland, it'll be fine. And the panda haters were people saying, no, as China rises and become more powerful, they will become more destabilizing and they will be in trouble. And today, luckily in America, because of our president and his forceful leadership, the only people the panda huggers are hugging are the panda haters. But this guy here, this guy has been a voice for decades about what is going. Yes, thank you. Yes, absolutely.
No,
But let me just say, let's get to what is the real crux of the problem. And there is a law in China which basically says, if you are a Chinese company, any data that you own, we have free access to. No, there's no rules, there's nothing. It's our data. And that's why if the Chinese companies are global, the Chinese essentially have global access to data. And you can say, that's okay, because I'm gonna encrypt my data. And it doesn't matter. The Chinese are literally gonna vacuum up all the information in the world, and they're gonna put it right next to the Ark of the Covenant until they use AI and quantum computing, and they figure out how to crack that data. And they will use that data to control the world. Data is the new nuclear weapon, and China will not be satisfied until it is the world's lone superpower. That's the problem you're talking about.
When we talk about artificial intelligence, many people will say, and make a good argument that the United States is ahead of China on AI. But we got to remember, as Jim has talked about, AI runs on data. The more data you have, the better your AI platforms are. And this is what we've all been talking about, the three of us, the three of you. Congressman Rogers, what are we going to do to prevent the Chinese from stealing American data?
Well, we have to win. We have to win this future, and we have to make sure that from a government perspective and from a private perspective, the legislation that we're working on right now around privacy, this is setting the standard for the rest of the world. We have Europe doing their own thing. China has no privacy standards, for example. But I think it's important that we do it the American way, and that's what I was talking about. President Trump has laid out principles. He released them at the end of 2019, principles around AI that are an American approach, and we need to be leading the world. There is huge potential around AI. AI is our future, so it needs to be an American approach that respects human rights, human dignity, includes the privacy protections that we cherish as Americans. But AI around solving some of the cancers, curing diseases. Our future includes driverless cars. China right now is in America testing their technology for driverless cars.
So one of the things we should be doing, perhaps, is getting the Chinese out of these tech cooperation partnerships with American companies, because although they don't develop this on their own, it doesn't really matter, because it's what they're taking through illegal means and through these legal partnerships.
What the Trump administration did on Huawei, for example, that was very important in the hardware to say we are not going to be using Huawei in the hardware in the United States of America, and impressing upon other countries around the world what the risk is. As you were saying, they're using any means they can to collect the data. And this really is about China's desire to collect more and more data.
Yeah.
Matt,
go ahead, Gordon.
I've got to ask you a question, because the Congresswoman talks about something which is really important, and that is, yes, we have a competition with China, but we cannot adopt China's ways, because we have our own. And this is the issue of freedom, which I have heard you talk about so many different times on so many different platforms.
Yeah, and I spoke about it a little bit last night, but I think this room needs to remember what Ronald Reagan told us was as true as the sun rising, and that is, as government expands, liberty contracts. And you see that play out in the contrast of the socialist system of China and the government control of people's lives, and the United States and its freedom. And we have to remember that we've been reminded time and again, it takes one generation to lose all of this. And that's why groups like CPAC and Turning Point and all the groups that are working out there every day to make sure the next generation is learning these fundamental principles of liberty and freedom. And I think one of the things that we need some help from Congress will be protecting especially PII, personally identifiable information, because that data that identifies individuals is so key in their behaviors that if that data is not protected and companies aren't made to protect it so that they're not hacked by the Chinese and then that data being exploited, I think we're in real trouble. So we need some, this is where Congress, instead of regulating for 20 years ago, needs to regulate for the next 20 years. And it needs to be precise, but it needs to just put guardrails on that personal identifiable information that ultimately is going to protect us from our government. Because remember, we talk about the Second Amendment all the time and how much we love the Second Amendment and how important it is. But remember, one of the reasons for the Second Amendment, if not the reason, was to protect us from tyranny. Yes. And I see a new Second Amendment for digital information to protect us from the tyranny of government as well.
Yes, I agree, and we absolutely need to be taking those steps. And we are leading in Congress right now, and I would urge people here to impress upon members of Congress, their representatives, their senators, the importance of taking action, but doing it in a way that respects human rights and it's the American way. We absolutely are in a battle right now. We have individuals on the House floor openly promoting socialism, and you see it played out in every argument right now, but it has been free markets, free enterprise, people respecting individual rights, and this needs to be a part of privacy, it needs to be a part of data collection, respecting individual rights that has lifted more people out of poverty, raised the standard of living, allowed creative ideas to flourish and lead the world. And that's going to be how we continue to ensure global dominance by the American way.
So, Jim, let me drill down on this a little bit. We have a lot of Chinese entities doing business in the U.S. They have partnerships with our academic institutions. They have totally penetrated our society. You talked about Chinese law. There's another Chinese law that I want to mention, and that is China's 2017 National Intelligence Law, which requires every Chinese individual and every Chinese company to spy if demanded by Beijing. So here we have in the US, and the Congresswoman talked about Huawei, but there's so many others. What are we going to do? I mean, this is terrible decisions we've got to make because we do have an open society. We allow everyone into the US, that's why we're so strong. But we do have potential spies in our midst, and they are under a compulsion, a government compulsion to surveil us and to steal our information.
That's a big issue, and what's really important is it is a global issue. Even if we win that fight here, and we have to win it among friends and allies, that is really, to me, the crucial thing at this point. And luckily, I think we have the leader of the free world as the President of the United States. That this man, 100,000 people showed up in Delhi. 100,000 people. Now, granted, if that were DC, that would be like 5 guys in a coffee shop. But you know what? If they had a stadium that could fill 1 million people in Delhi, they would have showed up. And that is really, really important. I just want to your point, one very quick issue is we have to be honest about what we're facing here. And a good issue, which is, I think, a lesson for us, is how we're dealing with the United Kingdom right now, which is going through this. So, as you may know, the United Kingdom made an announcement. They said they're going to let Huawei come in and build 5G infrastructure.
Which was a terrible decision.
But here's the deal. They lied to Boris Johnson. They lied to him. They said, we talked to the Americans. The Americans said there are things we can do to mitigate this. We talked to American industry. American industry said there are things we can do to mitigate this. Here's what American industry, and they left out, which was, we cannot mitigate against this threat. And if you let these people in your system, you will lose. And that's what they did not tell Boris Johnson. And that's why I think that decision will be reversed. And I think this president and this administration will do that. But it gets to this issue of truth to power, which is your point, is we have to have an honest conversation. We have to put before the American people what the real problem is. And I'm confident that leaders like this, they'll pass the right laws and do the right things to protect our freedom, protect our prosperity, and push back against what the Chinese are doing.
So, Congresswoman Rogers, when we actually start to talk about what we do with these Chinese entities, you mentioned Huawei. We need to get Huawei equipment out of our rural telecom networks, of course. But this other issue of these partnerships in Silicon Valley,
Yes.
I mean, this presents a very difficult challenge to an open society like ours.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that?
I was just down at the White House. I was meeting with Larry Kudlow. They are on top of this. And as was just said, thank God that we have President Donald Trump in the administration right now that believes in American leadership and is taking this head on. Larry Kudlow and the Trump administration they're working right now on bringing these leaders together, American industry together, so that we can be smart, we can be strategic, and we can be putting forward a plan that's going to be American-led with American principles and American values.
Just, you know, we probably should have started here, which is we've never kind of really said, what is 5G? And it's just not one more letter and one more number. It's not just a better this. 5G is to telecom infrastructure what a pen and pencil is to a supercomputer. This is the transformative technology that you, like people my age who have seen this incredible tech transformation in our lifetime, who went from essentially pen and paper to doing everything on this, right? More power here than put the space shuttle in orbit, right? That is the transformation that is coming. And when you take that capacity, which will be across all your infrastructure throughout your entire country and all your friends and allies, and you add to it the computing power of quantum computing and the analytical capability of artificial intelligence, this is the next generation world. This is a world that you will not recognize in a decade. That is why 5G is just the tip of the spear. And if we get this wrong, we're all going to wake up. Well, we're not going to all wake up speaking Chinese because I'm never going to learn. It's too hard.
But the hope in all of this is that American has been leading. It's been American. It's been our free markets, free enterprise. It's been American technology and innovation that has been leading the world. China's been stealing it, but we have been leading, and I think that is my hope. You know, Europe, the European Union, some of the laws that they're putting in place, that's only going to be further damper. You don't see them leading in technology and innovation because they don't have that approach.
The one concern I have, Gordon, and I know the panelists probably share this with me, is in the writing of the 5G standards, we allowed the Chinese to be at the table and set and help write those standards for how 5G, you know, essentially works and interacts with other 5G devices. It's a very important. Those standards are very important. They're worldwide standards so that all of our phones can connect to networks. I think this is again where I believe that if China is not going to act like a first world country and play by the rules, then we should not allow them to be involved in this standard writing for future technologies.
Right.
And it's really,
right.
I mean, at some point in time, and I think, you know, and this is the good news for everyone in this room, because Donald J. Trump is president, we will be able to have those conversations and hold the Chinese to account that if they want to be part of this world, they're going to play by the rules.
That's right. That's a very important point. You know, we've set the standards. They need to, and Donald Trump and his administration needs to hold the rest of the world accountable to those standards, or we might have to go in a different direction.
Right, or there'll be this two different systems develop, and quite frankly, that would be better if they're not willing to protect data privacy, to again not surveil on equipment that they produce in their country, and all the kind of things that we would agree and think are no-brainers. Then I think we need to not allow them to participate in the system.
And when we talk about standards about, let's say, for instance, 5G, there's also something else, and that is for artificial intelligence, the standards will be critical because with AI, you can do things which are incredibly destructive. One of the hopes I have, and this goes to Congresswoman Rogers' point, is that probably China will not be able to honor agreements on the proper use of AI, those standards that the world accepts, because they haven't been willing to do that, for instance, on genetic research on humans. They have violated all of those standards, and we've got to be very worried what comes out of China, especially in Shenzhen. So it seems to me that in terms of the world they will look to the United States because we advocate those things which the world wants, and they are concerned about China.
Right. Well, it will be the combination of the Trump administration, President Donald Trump, as well as working with American industry to put that pressure on the rest of the world to live up to these standards, because it's these American technology companies, they're doing business in every country around the world, and they can help be a part of ensuring that we have the right standards in place, American standards that uphold our principles and values.
She just mentioned American tech companies around the world, especially in China. We have a number of American tech companies, Microsoft, Google, especially Google, with these tech partnerships, AI sharing partnerships in China. Jim, do we allow that to continue going forward? I know that there are a lot of reasons on both sides, really complex issue. Right. How do you come out on this?
Well, I think those companies are going through a very painful learning curve. And it's not just them. We see Chinese behavior across the board. And I would say it would be a mistake if we just fixated on what's going on with a Facebook and an Apple, and we ignored what's going on with medium and small business really across the spectrum. So for example, one is technology laundering, about money laundering, right? So Chinese go, let's set up a joint venture. This is cool. We're gonna work together. Come over. Don't even bring your best technology. Bring your second best technology. And then what they do is they set up the joint venture, they get the technology, they duplicate it, they set up a duplicate Chinese company, and they undersell you and you're dead. Or my favorite one is they get a minority ownership on a board. They don't have to own Google and Facebook, right? They just get on a very good startup and they say, we don't even want to be, you're not going to be a Chinese company. We're just going to have a tiny stake, but we're going to have a seat at the board. And as a seat at the board, we have to do due diligence. So that means you have to show us like all your wiring diagrams and all your business plans and all your technology. And then we take that and we take it back to China and we steal it. So it really, you said it right in the beginning when you said, this is a whole of society competition. And the one thing that I would hate to leave this panel with is thinking, if we win the 5G fight, we're done here. That's like saying, if we get the guys on the beach at Normandy, we're done. It's not. Winning the tech battle is one battle. There's a security competition. Yeah. There is a battle for the soul of human identity. There is a fight for human rights. There is an economic battle. And we have to win across the board. And it's done when we have crossed the finish line, when China has stopped trying to take over the world. And they will try through every means possible. So it's not just enough to win the tech fight. And I know we all agree on that.
Yeah, and one point I would add to that is that the Congress recently expanded Cepheus review. And it's something at the Department of Justice. We have a seat at that table, and it's very important. But it's exactly on this idea of joint ventures, minority stakeholder ownership, and the like. Is that we really need, and this is where government can uniquely help, and that is that to not approve these technology transactions, joint ventures, and the like through Cepheus review, where they are not in our country's best interest. And that's fundamentally, and that's why, again, if you think about that Cepheus review process, it is the heads of the various departments, whether it's Treasury, whether it's State, whether it's Justice, that are going to be at that table, and those are all presidential appointees. And so it's going to matter who the executive is, because who reviews those transactions. And if a socialist, for example, is the executive and appointing those people on that Cepheus board, you can imagine an entirely different outcome for those technology transactions than you might otherwise see under a Donald J. Trump administration.
Okay, folks, we're almost out of time, but we've got to ask this panel one question. President Trump wins re-election in November. What's the first thing you want him to do in the tech competition after re-election? Start with Matt.
I want to continue eliminating Chinese technology on our technology backbones like 5G.
Okay. Then let me press you. What's your number two thing?
My number two thing is to try to impress upon the Chinese how important it is to be a first world country and play by the rules, and to continue to exert the kind of pressure he has been. Because again, I see like the next 5 years to really set the tone and establish the next generation of all of these technology.
So Kathy,
yes.
When the Republicans take over the House in November.
That's right. That's right. That's right. It's really important.
What would you want to see Congress do when it reconvenes?
Well, it would be very good, very important that Congress is working with the Trump administration, with a Republican majority in the House and the Senate, to set the standards that reflect American values, and one that encourages innovation and entrepreneurship. We We want to make sure that we continue to have startups and competitors to the big tech companies in America, and not just rely on a few, but we have the competitors in this marketplace also. I completely agree with what others have said. I think that we need to lead on 5G. We need to lead on AI. We need to be working strategically to make sure that it is America that's leading, that is winning the future, and working with our allies around the world to come and follow our leadership rather than China and their aggression right now to be the one that is leading the world. And it just is going to take the leadership of Donald Trump and a very committed Republican majority to ensure that it is American leadership that is winning this future for us. And it's important, as was said, to our economy, to individual rights, to national security, national defense. It's all related.
Okay. Jim, you and your mom have 58 seconds to close this out.
Right. First of all, if you have TikTok on your phone, delete it right now. Right. If you have TikTok on your phone, you are one of 120 million Americans who are spying for the Chinese, right? And wave to mom. Come on, wave to mom. Thank you. All right, good. That's good. And look, this is the most important thing, is we are all in this together, ladies and gentlemen. We have a great president. America can win this fight.
Absolutely.
But you're part of that. We can win this. Thank you.
Yep.
Right?
Good.
America must win this fight. America will win this fight with your help. Thank you very much, and please join me in thanking this panel.
Good.
Thank
Good to
you.
be with you. All right. Very good. Good to be with you. Thank you.